Alright folks, this is going to be my first YouTube video on homebrew, making beer. So what I have here is my converted grinder. And what I did is I just took one of these, I think they call them Cordova grinders, but anyway, mine's just, it's called a Victory brand. It was on Amazon cheap, like 28 bucks or something. And I just took a board, a 2x4, and I measured the width of that bucket. It fit inside, and then I just ran screws on the outside to attach the board to the bucket. Just 2 screws on each side. Drywall screws seem to work well. Then I took the grinder, bolt, just there's a clamp underneath that connects to that wood. Tighten that up. Went to Menards, got some 5-inch to 6-inch adapters. This is the normal hopper that's here. This is a 5 to 6-inch adapter, 6-inch pipe, and a 6 to 7-inch adapter. And that I just put 13 pounds of grain in. That was probably up to there. Not up very high, 3/4 of the way up that container. Attach. I took the handle off. And I just attached, I just cut a bolt. I took a bolt that fits into the threaded hole of where the handle was, and I ground down the head so that this chuck would fit over it. And that's it, and then here it goes. Here's demonstration. Seems to work like a champ. I'll finish this batch up, and then we'll go on to the next step. Alright, all done grinding up the grain. That was 13 pounds. 12 pounds of 2-row, 1 pound of like L15 or something, Crystal Light. But yeah, so the stack just unscrews, just twists and comes right off that thing, and that's it. I go put it away. Definitely recommend doing this outside. It's a very dusty job. And this my grinder actually has a pretty cool cover on it. A little closer, and this little plastic cover really keeps the grain going straight down to the bottom. And it's amazing. This bucket, little 5-gallon bucket, will hold all the grain for one batch, so it's just a matter of fill the tube, sit there with the drill, and let it go. And here's just like it was like a 3/8 bolt or something, and I just ground the head kind of round, and my chuck fits right over it. Done. If you've never used them, you adjust them here. It's weird. You just loosen this nut, and then you turn this one, and there's 2 blades in there that separate. It's hard to adjust without having grain in it. You got to set it kind of loose and then run it and check the grain and see if it's breaking up how you want it to. But and also when you're done running a batch of grain, you will hear the distinct sound difference when that tube is empty. You'll clearly hear a difference. So that's when you stop. It sounds almost more like metal to metal, because it probably is. These blades hitting each other. All right, that's it for now. All right, so right now, filling up a couple buckets of water. Probably about 5 gallons, 6 gallons of water. I think like 3.5 and 2.5, so 6 gallons. This water is going to be for taking the mash and taking the grains, putting them into this mash tun, as they call it, and adding water that's exactly 170 degrees and letting it sit for an hour. That's how you make wort. So the mash tun is this guy right here, and hang on a second. What I did is I made this thing. This is just PVC, bunch of holes drilled in it, square-ish, and with a piece of plastic pipe that's like 5/8. So anyways, that just goes into my mash tun like that. So there it is. That's the mash tun. So I throw the hot water in here, 170 degree water, fill it up about halfway, then I take the grains, from this container, that's the 13 pounds, and I add them to there. I add them to that water, and I just add them kind of slowly, and I stir it up so there's no clumps, and then I fill this thing up to the top with hot water, with that 170-degree water. Then I let it sit for an hour, and then then I drain it out real slow. I take like 40 minutes to drain that out, and once that drains, I'll drain it into that bucket, and then put it on the stove. Boil it for an hour, adding my hops as scheduled, and that is really the basis of creating beer. Be right back. So what I'm doing today is I'm gonna use fresh hops that I grew outside. I'm gonna give that a try. I did one batch last weekend, and for whatever reason, the fermentation just stalled. It really never started. But anyway, so I just break out a couple small saucepans. I need those for a few things. My battery's been going dead on this thing, so I have to stop, plug in, let it charge a little bit, but it kind of makes me not so mobile. So anyways, that is my wort chiller. Just had some copper cable, made a winding out of it, put a shut-off valve on one side, and that way I can adjust the flow with that valve. And the other side just happens to fit inside another hose with a clamp that goes on the outside. Works great. So that's the wort chiller. Every good kitchen has to have the monster spoon for stirring, deep buckets. Yeah, the mash tun was kind of neat to make. It was just a matter of retrofitting that ball cock on the bottom. I took the nut and the grommet that was on the original and replaced the nut, and used the same grommet, the plastic piece that went in between the walls. So yeah, and then just fitted this piping to it, and it works well. And then my trusty stove for boiling this water. The stove barely has enough power to do a full 6-gallon boil when I'm cooking up the wort. It does it, but it struggles. That's for sure. It takes forever. Right. So this ends up being my setup. I've got the water boiling, the strike water that I'm gonna throw into the mash tun with the grain. The grain that's in here will just all end up going in there, and then once that's filled with the 170-degree water in the grain, the temperature drops to about 154. Because of the loss of the grain being cooler. So once that's done, I put the cap on, I let it sit for an hour. Then I drain the mash tun into that bucket. It takes like 30 to 40 minutes, depending how impatient I am. Then I just take that bucket, put it back up there. Well, while that's sitting in there for an hour, what I do is I boil more water. I have to boil another same quantity, like 5-6 gallons, because that grain will absorb so much water, and it won't have enough initially anyway. So the goal is to have maybe 6.2 gallons of fluid, of wort, that I can boil, because I'm going to lose some due to evaporation. I'm going to plug the power in. So yeah, evaporation will kind of kill it. So if I can get like 6.5 gallons brewing, when it's all done, I'll have like around 5 gallons to put into the fermenter. So, got my hops, a couple buckets, big spoon, sanitizer, Star San, my siphoner, auto siphoner, my hose up there for the auto siphoner, wort chiller, Brix meter so I can measure specific gravity. Love that thing, way better than using the thermometer and all that, because you had to usually collect a whole bunch of wort before you could really get the gravity reading. This makes it so you just grab a couple drops, you're done. There's the yeast I'll be using today. Today's just going to be kind of a homemade pale ale. I just want to make it very IPA-ish, and lots of hops, very hoppy. So I'm going to use Chinook and Centennial, but I'll probably use more Chinook than that. That's probably 3 ounces, and I have another 7 ounces. I have another 10 ounces downstairs. So that's the initial part of the setup. A lot of this is just waiting. Wait for that water to reach 170. I have thermometers in both of them, and I'm waiting. Alright, so here is the grains all in the mash tun. So all 13 pounds are in here now, and Now I just stir it up, make sure there's no lumps. Try to do it real, make sure it's real good. There's a lump right there. But yeah, I'll go through it, make sure I crush all the lumps, the dough balls. And I got those because I actually poured it in just too fast. I actually had a little bit too much water. The sequence is you take a couple gallons of water, dump it into the orange bucket, into the mash tun, and then add about half your grains. Kind of slowly, kind of carefully, and stirring it. But it's tough to do, and I get impatient too. I just kind of dump it in there, then just deal with this part. So I get, and then I add some more water, but not too much. And then I add the rest of the grains, then I put more water on top of that, and I just kind of stir it up. So I just kind of sandwich in the grains in between layers of water and stir. And then that's it. Then I'll stir this up, put the top on it, and let it truly sit for an hour. The temperature is probably pretty close to 154. You don't want to go too high. That is the biggie, because it does whatever. It makes the beer taste bad. So that's really about it for now. Alright, so I shut the blinds so the glare wasn't so bad in here. Right now we're still letting the mash tun do its thing. We're probably only 15-20 minutes into it. I'll start making a schedule up here when I start certain things. Right now though, what I'm doing is I'm reboiling 2 new batches of water, and I get them up to a little over 170, and then I shut off the heat, and then by the time the hour is over for the mash tun doing its thing, I can add that water to the mash tun to help drain it into that bucket. That's called strike water. So there's a variety of ways to add the strike water to the mash tun. What I usually do is just drain it out reasonably slow, and then I just take a small saucepan, and I'll just scoop when I start seeing the grain at the top of this starting to appear. I'll just grab a scoop of water, gently pour it into the mash tun, and I'll keep that going until I get all the wort I need in the bucket. So, and now also what I did is I took another saucepan back there, and it just has like a couple cups of water and a tablespoon of sugar, and I'll boil that for a few minutes. I'll bring it to a boil, let it go for a few minutes, and then I let that cool for a long time till it gets to room temperature, and then I'll put it into a container, a glass container. It's like a couple gallon glass container, and I'll cover it with plastic, and I'll add the yeast and then stir it and then cover it with plastic, and that's my yeast starter. And I'll let that, and we'll see that when we get to that point. Alright, so now the party starts. Not sure if you can see me or not, but the hour's gone by. The wort is done being created by the grains that we've been soaking. I did something a little different. I added hops to the top of this, just a handful, fresh dried hops from my garden, just to give the wort a little bit of extra oomph. So at this point what I'll do is I will start bleeding some of this out slowly. So I'll get a few batches of this. I don't know if you can see it or not. What I do is I'm draining it out slowly, this initial part, and I'll get 2 or 3 of these saucepans full of the wort and pour it back on top gently, so that I get all the clumps and a lot of the grain that kind of made it through, and it makes it kind of very unclear, cloudy. So I'll get a couple of these buckets. Right. Then I gently just pour right back on top. Just so you don't want to disturb the grain bed and all that stuff. And I think the grain bed's pretty thick, so toaster oven. Anyways, let me grab a couple of these buckets, and then once I do this, get a few of these buckets out, throw them back in, then I'll start doing wort draining into the brew bucket, nice and slowly. And as that's happening, as I'm draining water out into the bucket slowly, I'll grab my 170 degree water from these 2 buckets and add them to this slowly to keep this moist and that flowing until I get that bucket all full. And really that's it. So that's the extra step that all grain adds, is letting it sit in here, letting it ferment, maybe not ferment, letting it just brew like a tea, and then we extract the wort from that. So if you were doing an extract, at that point when that thing's full of wort, your can of motor oil you get as your extract is your wort. You just take that, add it to hot water, you're good to go. But with all grain brewing, it's a couple extra steps of just making the wort, and then collecting it, and that's it. So it's really easy too. And if you buy in bulk, if you buy grain in bulk, this cost me $45 for a 55-pound bag of 2-row. So really, I have about $10 into a 12-pound batch, and so that plus the yeast, which is about $4. So, and then my own homegrown hops, I can make a batch for about $15, and that'll make 5 gallons of maybe some serious great beer. Just can't beat that. But I do buy hops as well. So when I use regular hops, it comes out great, and it adds a little more to the price, but still very cheap. I'm gonna walk it over there. All right, it's a little noisy right now, but once they get a layer of wort on the bottom, it'll be quieter. So that's it. That's the beginning. I have it coming out about that rate's probably a little slow. Maybe like that. It's supposed to be like a gallon per 15 minutes or something, but I usually don't go that slow. I might be a little fast though. Yeah, this time I want to get my max efficiency out of this wort, so it's a higher in alcohol. It's just I want more sugars out of this grain, and sometimes the best way to do it is slowly. Cute kids. Alright, so just to give a little bit of a live demonstration of how I add the strike water. And I know there's batch and sparge and a lot of terminology for what this is, but it doesn't have to be that complicated, Just add the water slowly, keep like right now it's about that high in here. And I can probably, as the grains settle, it'll lower and lower, but the trick is just to keep the water just above the grain and keep the flow going at a reasonable rate. It's not bad to time that either to see. So you can, there's lines on that bucket. I have gallon mark lines, and I can time how long it takes to do one gallon. Then I'll know if I'm going too quick or too slow. Probably no such thing as going too slow, but some people crank that full blast and just let it go, then fill this with a bunch more water, let it go. But it doesn't seem, I did that last time, and it didn't seem as strong. You measure the specific gravity, and it'll tell you how much sugar is really in there. And the higher that number, the more alcohol potential it has. So the other thing I want to show you is my schedule. So I make a little schedule on my little whiteboard, and it just shows what time I start, what time the yeast, I haven't, it says 9:45, that's for boiling the water. We'll still get to that, but I'll wait for the last half hour for that. But so I show where I did the hops to the mash tun, which is the first time for me, and then below that is just my schedule. So 60 minutes is, what that really means is once I'm done extracting this wort from the bucket, once I get all that into there, and I get a nice full, like 6, maybe more, I'll take that, put it on the stove, and once it begins boiling is when my 60-minute timer begins. So it'll take a while before it boils. It's probably 40 minutes before a 6-gallon boil, so it's a bummer. It takes just a slow stove. But so at 60 minutes though, when I first bring it to a boil, I'll add 2 ounces of Centennial hops. And then 30 minutes from then, I'll add 1 ounce of Chinook. 20 minutes from then, I'll add 1 more ounce of Chinook. Then at 15 minutes, I'll take that wort chiller right there and drop it into the bucket there when it's up on the stove and it's boiling away. And that'll start its sanitation for that. It'll sanitize that wort chiller. Then also at 15 minutes, I'll add a little pill, Irish moss pill, and it's supposed to be all natural, and it's supposed to help make the beer more clear than it would normally be. I don't know, collects the proteins or some blah 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 stuff. But then 10 minutes I'll add 2 ounces of Chinook, and then at 0 minutes it's flame out, and then I'll start the chilling process, and I'll put run water, my hose through that wort chiller, and then once the wort's down to 75 degrees, I can remove that. And then what I'm going to do this time versus my last time was I'm going to strain out all those hops. Oops, I got to pause for a bit and take care of that. That would be called too dry, not enough water in your mash tun. Alright, so now the mash tun has more water in it. Why it looks kind of weird is because those hops on the top they look like just swollen green. I don't know what you want to call it. It doesn't look too good, but they smell pretty good. And we're still collecting along. We're probably at almost a gallon right now. So I'm probably going a little fast, but not too bad. I'm going to add a little more while we're filming. That's it. So then I'll just stand here for an hour. Actually, I have a stool I'll set up, and I'll just continue this process till that thing is basically filled up to them rivets on the handles in the bucket. So this is my yeast starter. I don't know if that's actually officially a correct term with how I'm doing it, but so that's inside there's a cup of water that I boiled with a tablespoon of sugar on the stove till it boiled a few minutes, and then let it cool a whole bunch, and then threw it into this Pyrex container and covered it with plastic just so nothing was in there. I have 3 cats in this house, so hair is an issue. Actually 4 cats. But anyway, so here's my yeast. Today, I normally use SO5, but I didn't have any. So I'm going to use this. Since this is just a random beer anyways, I'm just trying to make a hoppy golden beer. And it's all experimental. So I'll use this yeast. So a half hour before my wort's done brewing, cooking in the brew kettle, I will add the yeast to that cup and stir it up good. And then, by the time I have that wort cooled, this thing will be full of foam. It'll be, this yeast will activate and it'll fill all the way up with foam. So I'd use a bigger container, but that one's in use right now, so this container's a little slow, a little small. Still cruising along. Almost done with the collection. Another 10-15 minutes, but my strike water is getting low, so I just started up a second batch. Just a little bit, just in case. So really, it'll be the 3rd container. So yeah, this, I guess when you brew with more grain, it absorbs a lot of the wort. So you just gotta have plenty of prepared water on hand, and that's about it. But it'll be close though. I still have more water in my first bucket, but things are going good. Yep, it'll be nice to get the boil started, and then once we do that, we'll talk about the chiller, how that's all set up, and then we'll pitch that yeast and watch that grow as well. Alright, so basically we're at the time before the 60 minutes starts. So the pot sitting on here is full, very full of the wort. It's foamy. I don't know if you can really see that too much, but a lot of foam on the top. But as it boils, as it begins to boil, and right when it gets to the boiling point, it will foam like crazy. And at that point, you stir it a lot, move it off the heat, maybe move it back on, turn down the heat. It'll go a little nutty for about a minute or 2. And then that foam will break away, and then it'll become a smoother, clear top. And then I can walk away from this, minus the hop schedule. So 60 minutes, I'll put in my first batch of hops. Come back 30 minutes later, put in another ounce, come back another 20, and just follow my hop schedule. And that's it for the next hour, just adding hops at the right times. And during that time now is a great time to clean up, get all your mash tun put away, get your bucket, bales, and get rid of all the things you don't need anymore at this point. And also in a little while we'll do a bricks test, a bricks meter test. Actually I'll do that now. All that is I've got this fancy little device, bricks meter. And it's just, you just take some of that wort you let it cool down, so it's like room temperature, and then squirt a little on this glass, flip that over so no air bubbles. You look through it, and you'll see a line, dark and light, and right where that line is, there'll be a gauge. And you're shooting for the highest number possible at this point. 1065 I'm hoping for, since it was a pretty big batch, and I was good with my draining of it slowly. So we'll see how that goes. I'll get a little bit out of there now and let it cool down, and then we'll do a measurement. So it's about 11:45, so it's been 11:20, it's been 25 minutes working its way up to a boil. Definitely not there yet. Sometimes I'll shove the thermometer in here just to see how close it is to 212, but it's getting there, and I can hear the boiling noise more. So I've been stirring it just a little bit, but it's close. I suspect in like 10 more minutes or so, we'll get to that hop break point and watch the foam do its thing, and then after that we'll add our first addition of hops. One thing I'm going to do that's a little different this time, I've never done before, but I haven't been using fresh hops for a long time, ever. This will be the second batch I've done fresh hops. So after the wort is all done, we go through all our times, get all the hops in there, then I'll end up with a lot of hops. After I get it all chilled, I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it back in my mash tun, which I cleaned real well, sterilized. I have my manifold that I made. Don't worry, I'll sanitize again. And then I'll siphon that wort into here. It'll be up on that chair again. And then I'll drain it. Then I'll clean that bucket real good. And then I'll drain this back into that bucket, straining out all them hops and whatever bigger particles of grain got through. And that way I'll start off with a pretty clean wort. I don't like doing this step because it definitely adds fear of getting bacteria in there. So I definitely will use my Star San and sanitize it, drain it, let it dry, and then go. And that seems to work pretty well. But that'll be a new thing, just to get all them dang hops out of there, so that when I do pitch the yeast after that, I can really aerate the mixture, get a lot of oxygen in there, really get it, aerated so the yeast will have a chance to do its thing, and then I'll transfer it to the carboy. So, all coming up. It'll be a while, so I'll just keep this thing covered for now. Keep the cat hairs out and all that good stuff, and once that gets to that hot break point, we'll take a look. So we're getting close to that hot break point. We're getting a little boiling action going on. It's starting to foam a little more. I'm going to film a little extra here just to see if I can catch it doing that. I may have to slam the camera down real fast so to deal with it though, as far as stirring it and getting it off the flame if need be and all that kind of jazz. But yeah, so this is, I think, called the hot break point, and it's just gonna start foaming here pretty aggressively in a little bit, I think. I did a specific gravity test. It was a bummer. 1050 is what it is, which is kind of a drag. I was really hoping for something a lot higher than that. I guess 12 pounds of grain isn't enough if I want a 1065 kind of batch. But the other thing I could have done is let it sit in that mash tun longer, like go an extra half hour, and really let it extract the sugars from that grain. And maybe next time I'll do that, since it doesn't seem to be, I don't seem to be getting as much as I want. I know I could add stuff to the beer too, like sugar, white table sugar if I wanted to, but I don't want to mess with the flavor too much. What I'm looking for is just like a nice blondish, hoppy IPA. Yeah, that's my goal here. And the fact that I'm using strictly my own garden hops, so there's a lot of variables there. It's a first year grow, so they're not as mature as they would be. Next year I expect a pretty good harvest. This year was good, probably close to 2 pounds overall out of 8 plants. But here we go. But I think next year we'll more than double that. So, but I am going to be planting even more hops next year, so they'll be first year ones as well. Yeah, so that it's starting to boil. Come on. Give it a little stir just to get the heat a little more even. I did hop a little bit from mash tuns. Even in the kettle, I added some hops in it just for the heck of it. Not many, just some Chinooks. Probably will add green color to the beer. But they were dried, so. But yeah, definitely not doing any wet hopping. I don't want it to taste like grass. I'm just hoping that this attenuates, that this one ferments like it's supposed to, and I get my bubbles. I'll just be a happy camper if I see that. Next step after that will be, how will it taste? How will these homemade hops, homegrown hops be compared to commercial? And I'm not expecting anything magnificent this year. I'm just hoping next year will be a lot better produce and more mature hops. Well, it's pretty anticlimactic watching this thing boil. It's slowly getting there. It's trying to get to that hop break point, but yeah, it's just going to be a bit, so I'll pause. So it's noon right now, so it's exactly 40 minutes for this to come to a decent boil, and that's probably the best this will ever get boiling, which is actually, it looks good right here, but it seems like it calms down more as the bubbles and foam go away longer in the brew. But so it's noon. I count this as the beginning. Shortly here I'll be adding them hops. It really hasn't gone to that hop break point yet. I think it's just starting to right now. That foam's starting to get a little thicker and produce a little more, but you know, it might not be much of an issue anyways. This one may not, you know, go bleeding over the top or try to as far as the foam goes. So I'll give it another minute, and then I'm going to start adding hops just so we can get that party started. Okay, now we're getting toward that hop break right now. So that's what it looks like before you start panicking. Alright, I'm going to kill the film. I just want to show you when it goes actually into it, which it is right now. Well, actually, let me see if I can keep it under control by stirring it. Yeah, but all of a sudden it goes from 0 to hero. Trying to get back to 0. That wasn't too bad though. Yeah, so usually just moving it, stirring it around, I guess it can be enough to keep it at bay. But really, if it starts to boil over, you just want to move it, slide the pot off the heat and let it cool down for a second. And I think that was it. Now I think the foaming's pretty much done. I leave the spoon right there on the side there, so I don't have to worry about it not getting unsanitary by laying it on the counter or anything like that. So it never touches the surface once we begin this process. At least that's the goal anyways. If it did, I'd wash it, spray it with Star Sand, let it dry off, and then use it again. But I just leave it right up there. Usually works out great. Cool. So that's it. So now, for the most part, that foam will go away, and I'll be able to add hops and really just kind of set it and forget it. Set the timer, and then come back every time I should to make my hop additions. I just dumped in about 2 ounces of Centennial, and this will be my bittering hops. So I'll let these go for 30 minutes, and then I'll come back and I'll add the next one. Then I'll start with all my Chinook hops, and that'll be for the rest of it. Make sure it's doing good, decent. Alright. Kind of hard to hold a steady camera and look at the hops as I stir them, but there you go. Sorry for all the shakiness. So I've already done the second hop addition, the 2 ounces of the Centennial, the 1 ounce of the Chinook. I already did that, Chinook. What I'm going to do different though this time, first time ever. Got a lot of first time evers on this brew, which is really a no-no typically if you want to keep things consistent and have expected results. But since this is all my hops anyways, I'll have no idea how hoppy it'll be or how hoppy it won't be. But anyways, I normally take the cup of water, a tablespoon of sugar, boil it, let it cool, throw it in this thing, and then at the right time, like a half hour before I'm ready to pitch it or so, I add the yeast to this, let it grow so I know it's alive and well. It gets rehydrated, and then you can see it's alive. Well, since that last batch, stalled and never fermented. And it really bummed me out because it was my own hops, it was my own grains that I grind myself and all that. And I don't know why that batch stopped. So what I'm going to do different, as well as straightening out all the hops before I pitch the yeast, is I took some of that wort that was boiling, half cup, and I'll let that cool down really well, and then I'll pitch the yeast to this. And the logic is it's the same sugars. The yeast will be eating the same sugars as it will be once it's in the big bucket carboy, versus white table sugar versus wort. You know, starting it in white table sugar versus starting it in the element that it's going to be living in anyways. So, I Googled it, and other people have done it, and it seems reasonable to do. And that'll be that. So it'll serve two purposes: rehydrating the dry yeast, and potentially giving it a little sugar to get it growing and you know, show that it's alive. So, all right, it's time for a 1 ounce Chinook addition. But I gotta weigh out my scale and then go dump it in, stir it up, done. So I won't bore you with that. All right, I'll be back. All right, so it's like the last 15 minutes right now. I'm gonna add my Whirl Flock Irish moss, they tell me. Add that, and then take the wort chiller, submerge it in carefully. And it always does that. Nice. Wow, right on. Holy crap, let me get a bucket. That's just all the water that's extra in the copper lines. That heat, the heat hits it and boils it, and it just shoots it right out. It's awesome. All right, that should be that. All right, so that's the 15-minute counter on that. That begins now. I'll get hoses ran through my kitchen window, because out here in the country we do what we want. But I'll be back. Alright, so that's 2 ounces of Chinook. It's the last hop addition I'm going to do. Normally you turn the flame off and then add your hops, like with pellets and all that stuff. But since these are not so processed as, you know, ground down and all that, they don't. I just feel like they need more time to sit in that boiling water to extract the hops from it. You know, the lupins, whatever it is, the stuff we want. So instead of doing a flame out hop, I'll just do that. I'll do the last 10 minutes, let it boil for 10 minutes, and then that's it. Damn. Thing doesn't want to quit. So just stir them up a little bit, get them wet, and dry the floor, and then I'll go get the hose setup done. Alright, so here's my wort chiller setup. It happens to be a garden hose right under this window. That's the inlet. Goes to a shut-off valve, so I can adjust it, the flow through here. Goes through the chiller, water goes out into the yard where I can see the end of the hose, one hose up on the other, so I can actually watch how much is coming out pretty accurately. And I don't put it, of course I don't go full blast, I just go at a slow to medium rate max. And the beauty of living out in the country and having a well is that the well water is very cold, at like 40-some degrees or something, and it's supposed to be very cold once it pulls it from way underground up. And so it'll still take 20 minutes or so, maybe a little more, to get it under 80 degrees. That's usually, I try to get it under 80, that's my benchmark. The yeast is happy with that, and it seems to work well. Hose was getting hot by that pipe. But anyway, so that's it. I haven't started it yet. I will very shortly here, and that's it. That's it for the boil itself. And also what I'll do is now I'll add that yeast pack to this, stir it up real good, and then cover it back up and let it start. doing its thing. So it'll take a while, a good half hour or so. So it should be very good timing. Alright, just added the yeast to the wort, the collected wort. That was pretty cool down, so it should be good. I hope in about half hour we have a lot of foam in there showing activity. The wort's chilling. Seems like it's always best to just kind of stick around it and stir it to help the wort through the chiller. It seems like it helps cool it quicker if you do this. If you just kind of every few minutes do this, or even just stand by it for 20 minutes and do it. So that's that. Timer's going off. So out there is my water. Let me see if I can get a good shot of that. Yeah, it's just coming out the hose. Not too easy to see, but yeah, so there's that. And that's it. So now we just wait till this chills down to a good temperature and we'll be okay. Then we'll go into a new step where I'm going to transfer it from that bucket down to the mash tun. I'll put the mash tun back on a chair though, like how I had it earlier, and I'll actually siphon out of that bucket, out of there, instead of trying to pour it. I don't want to make a big mess, and the siphoning should work just fine. At least get halfway down, and then maybe I'll pour it in. But after I pour it in there, I'll clean that bucket, and then I'll put that bucket on the floor and open up the mash tun valve so that it drains all into that bucket again. And by then it should be pretty clean of all the hops, and then some extra grain as well. And then I will pitch the yeast and get it in a carboy and see if I get fermentation. That's kind of my biggest goal today. Second, but of course I want it to taste good. I mean, what good's a beer if it doesn't taste good? But if it doesn't ferment, it's no good neither. So, Alright, so now I'm basically done chilling. I am letting the chiller run a little longer, but I'm basically done chilling, and I'm siphoning out the wort into this my mash tun, just so I can get rid of all those hops. If you've never used an auto siphoner before, you gotta get one. They're ridiculously easy to use and work great. They just eliminate a pain, and even though it may take a little time when you're siphoning versus just dumping buckets, you can really get clear wort, and you'll save your body, from trying to lift this thing, and less chance to make a mess, less chance to drop or break anything. So, cause it's a lot of hours here in the kitchen, so you hate to spill that whole bucket of wort all over the floor, which would be not fun to clean. But anyway, so there we go. I'm still chilling it. I'm adding, I'm putting it in a mash tun, then I'll drain it back out of the mash tun, back into that bucket after I clean it, and then I'll add the yeast and I'll aerate the crap out of it, and then we'll get it in the carboy. So I'm near the final state right now. So I transferred it from the kettle bucket back into this mash tun, and now I'm just I pitched the yeast. I added some of the wort into this bucket, and then I threw the yeast in, and I took that container and just dumped it in there. I re-sterilized everything to the bucket to handle all that kind of stuff. So everything's sterilized, and now this should get as aerated as it possibly can with the speed that the wort's going into that bucket. Plus I've been stirring it just to introduce a ton of oxygen so that the yeast has all the things it needs to do what it's got to do to ferment. So after this I'll get it into the carboy. And that finishes up the brew. There she is in the carboy, and I'm going to pray for bubbles. And it should work. Everything seemed to go well, so that's it. That's a little something, That's another beer back there going on, but yeah, there's the latest one. And that's it, folks.